Welcome, everyone. My name is Sejal Thacker, and I'm your host for today's conversation. And I'm really looking forward to talking to you a little bit more today about what we're doing in the health and wellness space. We live in a world where addressing health concerns reactively is no longer enough. And so the future of healthcare really demands a proactive, personalized, and innovative approaches. And so today we're going to dig in to what Nobody Studios is doing in this space. We're going to talk to you a little bit about our commitment of providing personalized healthcare, and we're going to share some of the exciting projects that we're working on. And so joining us today for this insightful conversation are two incredible individuals. First, we have our chief nobody, Mark McNally, whose vision has driven Nobody Studios to where it is today. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Hey, Sejal.
Hey there. And of course, we have our visionary leader of the health and wellness vertical at Nobody Studios, Dr. Eric Reese. Dr. Reese has played a pivotal role in shaping the studio's mission and driving innovations in health and wellness. Welcome, Dr. Eric.
Thanks, Sejal. It's great to see you, and great to see you too, Mark.
Great to see you. And so for those of you that are joining in, feel free to drop your questions into the comments. If you have any questions for Mark or Dr. Eric, put them in the chat. I'll be monitoring those as we go. So Dr. Eric, let's just jump right in. I wanted to just start off by just asking you, what ignited your passion for health and wellness innovation?
Yeah, that's a really good question. To be completely honest with you, it kind of started with my own health journey because I was a patient first. And then I became a doctor second. And as we started building out the studio, I realized that those are two really big, important kind of milestones for me that has shaped my perspective of health and wellness and healthcare. What I saw in practice was that there are a lot of people that are still looking for answers to the questions that they have. And in the early days when Mark and I started talking about, what is the studio going to look like? What should health and wellness actually look like? The discussions were nothing short of exciting and amazing about being able to have a part and being able to help people not only help themselves, but get the kind of help and care that they need. And so this really is ignited by the fact that I've seen a lot of people who still need help. I know that there are a lot of people that still need help. And I get up every morning knowing that every day that we work, we're getting closer and closer to helping even more people through the efforts that we're doing at the studio. And that's exciting to me. I know it's exciting to probably a lot of people that are listening to this too.
Yeah, no, it's such a huge area. And Mark, this has been one of the focus areas right from the beginning. I remember in one of the first conversations we talked about this being one of our focus areas. So why was this one of the areas that you decided for the studio for us to focus on?
Yeah, I mean, I'd probably have a similar answer to Dr. Eric. I have had a number of family and friends that have been struck by chronic disease in the last 10 or 15 years. And I tend to be the kind of person that people tend, turn to and say, help me figure this out. And so I had to go really deep into like what I consider what the best the industry had to offer, what the best, the pharmaceutical industry had to offer. And I became really intimately aware of kind of the strengths, but also the weaknesses of our current system. And then I also had it's topical right now, and I'm glad it's topical, but, mental health, the last 4 or 5 years, I've had some very close friends that I've lost to mental health and suicide and addiction, and had it, affect my own family and my own personal life. And so those things have just made me very empathetic, where I'm not sure I was the same empathetic entrepreneur 20, 30 years ago when I started my career. But also just a deep appreciation for, I've applied my best thinking to it. I've maximized the current system to its max. And there's just a lot of deficiencies that lead to people to a lot of suffering. And, I think one of the things that happened when I created the studio was, my wife told me not to complain anymore. If I complain about something 2 or 3 times in a row, she'll say, aren't you in the business of creating companies to make the world a better place? And there's nothing more true than in health and wellness. So I find myself just galvanized by all the things that I think can be better, that are going to be better. And there's some breakthroughs that are really, really exciting. Probably more breakthroughs in the healthcare space right now at our fingertips than we've seen in the last 100 years. And that's really exciting. And how that's going to reach patients, I really believe is not going to be through the traditional healthcare system. It's not going to go through a traditional payer provider cycle or even through your primary care physician. I think it's going to largely go direct through new companies and applications and devices. And so it's an exciting time. Obviously, there's risk with what I just said, but it's an exciting time with the amount of stuff that can impact patients and improve their lives. And I'm just excited to be a part of it.
Yeah, thank you. And I know that, I know one of the emphasis we have in the studio is taking a patient-centric approach. And so either one of you, whoever wants to take this one, can you elaborate on how this approach is going to sort of guide us as we develop in this, as we create new codes, as we take in new founders to help us with this space? Talk to us a little bit more about the patient-centric approach.
Yeah, I'll take a swing and let Dr. Eric run from it, but we're from there. But I usually say it's about enabling the patient, right? And so, when the internet came along, I think it was probably a frustrating time for a lot of physicians, because you'd have, patients walk in and they had themselves self-diagnosed, and they had been reading the internet for 3 weeks, and they were sure they had 14 things that, no one's ever heard of before. And so there was a saying going around, like, stop asking Dr. Google, and I've heard my friends that are physicians say that, but I think it's gone through a wave now since the days where, the patient is more educated than ever. And unfortunately, there's the fundamental things that are broken down with our system. I always say the healthcare system, this is the country, if you're in the United States, this is where you want to be if you have a traumatic event. God forbid you have a car accident, gunshot, something like that. You want to be in the United States of America. You're going to be okay, or your best chances of being okay. But when it comes to chronic disease, when it comes to wellness as an overall concept, which is no longer any one specialty, we understand today more. It has, your gut is connected to your sleep, connected to your brain, is connected to your skin. There's all these so many different things interconnected. But if you go to the root of where we got this wrong, it's because, like it or not, we became a litigious nation, 30, 40 years ago. We have 96% of the attorneys in the world live in the United States, and there's never a lawsuit that they didn't like. And so what that did to the healthcare system was it created an environment where physicians who got into it for the right reasons literally cannot practice unless it's within their very narrow area of specialty. That's the only place that they can get insurance. And insurance costs have gone through the roof. You'll see physicians and clinics that have multi-million-dollar insurance policies, and only if they practice within their narrow scope. And so that litigious kind of domino fell that took physicians into a very narrow spot, which created what we now have as a referral system. So you go see your doctor and say, Doc, I don't feel good here, here, and here. And the doctor writes you 4 referrals to other physicians. But what that's created is there's no doctor really who has one view of the patient. I know what's going on with you. I know the results of your test. I know what happened when you went to that referral. No, it's out of sight, out of mind. And it's not the intention. All physicians went in, for most of them, for the right reasons. But the system, the litigious nature, insurance, the liabilities have forced this system where no real physician has the incentive or the visibility into what's going on with your care. The only person that does is the patient. So we fundamentally believe that what's going to happen in the next 10 years is a wave of applications. We already have more data about ourselves than ever to start to help organize and make sense of, if anybody has a chronic disease, you'll know you probably have 4 folders of blood work going back 10 years. And if you go see a new doctor, you're spending the first 20 minutes telling them your history, trying to get them up to speed with something that you already know. So we just believe that today, right here and now, there's a massive breakthrough that's going to take place in terms of empowering the patient to take care of their own care, make sense of the things that they're seeing, help them remember things that they've heard or tests that they've had, and make it easier to empower the patient to improve their health.
Thank you for that. And yeah, I just want to give a shout out. This topic is resonating with people. We've got Christine Passo. She says, when the doctor becomes the patient, or in your case, Dr. Eric, the patient turns into the doctor, the impact for growth and awareness is huge. And then I want you to comment on this question in a bit. There's a question coming in here from a LinkedIn user. I'll just put this up here for you, Dr. Eric. What's the #1 governor of even faster growth for your area of focus. And so, if you want to add anything on to the patient-centric approach question first, and then lead right into this other question that came in for you.
I think Mark touched on some really core principles that have had massive effects, and I would say, negative effects on the ability for people to truly find the help and care that they actually need. I think a common misconception is the fact that health, begins and ends with the doctor, and that's so wrong and so misleading, because your health is every decision that you make during your day at every moment. What you put in your body, what you put on your body, how much sleep you get, how much exercise you get, foods that you eat. I mean, there's so many factors that go into health, and I think that's why we've failed as a society to find one pill, one surgery, one vertical that's really going to have all the answers. And so, Mark's absolutely right. Not only is the system not set up, but I really feel as though one of the big factors that's affecting society as well too is just a lack of education. One of the most frustrating things that I experienced when I was working with patients is the fact that most patients don't even have the fundamental knowledge to even formulate the basic questions to actually get the answers that they're truly looking for. Now, what's sad about that is doctor comes from the Latin root meaning docere, meaning to teach. And so, in the early stages of medicine, it was all about teaching patients. And like Mark said, empowering them to own their results, own their data, own their health, own their habits. And sadly, that's just not how we are, especially in the United States. And so what's unfortunate is that people are now very reliant on systems that are reactive instead of being proactive. And sadly, we can only get so much back after we've lost functionality, after we've been in situations where, chronic pain or inflammation, things have taken over. And so, one of the core values and beliefs that we have as a studio is patients just truly owning their health, right? So owning their health, owning their outcomes, but also owning their data, taking the insights from the Aura rings that Mark and I have. And what did your sleep look like last night? Well, what affected it in a positive way or a negative way? How can we help people have that freedom and that independence to live a healthy life? The sad reality of it is that we're living longer, but we're also living longer with disease. And so I don't really look at that as necessarily a good thing. It's all about that quality of life and then the health span, the amount of health you have in the years that you have on earth. And so it's just core into our thought process. And every day when we're strategizing and thinking about what else can we do, at the center of all of that is the center of the patient. And I think that that's really core to us as a studio in general, just why we're called Nobody Studios. But more importantly as well too, in the health and wellness space, we're really keenly focused on helping people help themselves.
Yeah, you reminded me of a conversation I just had literally like 2 days ago. You both know my good friend Summer Watson. She just got diagnosed with cancer, and I talked to her this Monday, and I'm like, "What'd you do this weekend?" And she's like, "I spent all weekend researching." And I'm like, researching? She's working with the top hospitals, that you can work with on this area, and yet she's having to spend her own time because, like you said, we're in charge of our own health. We can't just turn it over to somebody else, right? And so I agree. I think patient-centric innovation is going to really lead to substantial improvements, and things like wearable devices. I'm wearing my Fitbit watch right now, right? That tracks my physical activity. That's going to help monitor metrics, help me make positive lifestyle changes. Because at the end of the day, if I want to live a healthy lifestyle, it's up to me. Mm-hmm. Right. And so Dr. Eric, do you want to answer this question that came in from the user here? What's the number one governor of even faster growth for your area of focus, or for health and wellness?
Yeah, I think the first thing, and really this is probably the biggest thing for me, is really just asking questions. I think the moment we think we have it all figured out, or that we know exactly what we need to do, is the moment that our biases limit our not only beliefs but our ability to actually get one of the answers we're looking for. So this is something that Mark's taught me really well, is like, ask the questions. When you're having conversations with industry experts and leaders, like, ask the questions, be curious, continuously challenge that narrative and that status quo, because that's how we truly innovate. And I think in medicine, most of the time doctors are seen as authorities. People come to them, patients come to them, and they're expected to have the answers. And so we really need to flip that script and ask people not just what they want, but get information and get more data to help build companies and build solutions for them. I love the Henry Ford quote where he's like, if we would have asked people what they would have wanted, they would have said faster horses. Yet they built the automobile. And so we can't fall into that fallacy or that trap. And I think that's where a lot of the experience comes in with the leadership team and the people that we have in the studio, is to help us really guide through that, and build not only innovative solutions, but solutions that can help people. And that's really what excites me about the health and wellness vertical.
Yeah, and we're not even that's a whole nother conversation for another day. Is we're assuming people know how to communicate. If there's cultural differences, there's language differences. Now these people, I mean, I remember when my dad was in the hospital before he passed away. For 10 days, I was there, and it was like nobody was even reading the charts, right? And he was trying to communicate, and they were just thinking that he's being too demanding. And I'm like, he's just trying to tell you what he's feeling, but because
Yeah.
of the language barrier, he wasn't getting the proper treatment that he should have probably gotten. Luckily, we were able to have somebody there with him the entire time he was in the hospital. But how many people can do that? How
Yeah.
many people can have somebody advocating for your what's going on with your health during your time of need? And so Greg Zen has a good question here. One of the biggest problems is that most U.S. doctors are not properly educated on nutrition as medicine. Could you speak on that?
Yeah, happy to. And I know Mark has some strong opinions on this too, but nutrition really is the keystone for health. I mean, think about how many times you eat throughout the day. I mean, depending on your lifestyle, it could be, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times a day. And all of those foods, are either helping you or they're hurting you. And to be fair, we don't always know which foods are going to help and hurt you. But what we do know is that food affects you in very significant ways. And not to get too deep in the weeds here, but what we know is that food feeds your gut microbiome. These are trillions and trillions of bacteria that live inside your intestinal tract. Those bacteria, eat the food that you just ate, and they put off different chemicals and nutrients and byproducts that can either benefit you or they cannot benefit you. There's some interesting research in the literature right now talking about obesity. Now, obesity, we thought, well, was just an excessive amount of eating food and calories in the wrong foods. But what they're finding out is that the types of gut microbiomes, the bugs that live inside your intestinal tract, can actually have a positive or negative effect on your ability to lose weight. So it's no longer just the foods you eat. It's no longer the amount of foods that you eat. It's literally the trillions and trillions of bacteria that live in your intestinal tract that could affect how those foods affect your brain and body. So you're right. I mean, nutrition is a foundational element. Um, I love that saying, let food be thy medicine and thy medicine be thy food. I think that's a phenomenal quote that is more true today than it was when it was said years ago. And so, yeah, you're right. I mean, nutrition is foundational, and a lot of people really are uneducated about it, sadly. And so, that's really where we're at today, and I think we can change that.
Hey, Mark, we can't hear you.
Oh, sorry.
Oh.
I'll take a swing at that. Yeah, I think there's a couple things I think of when I think of nutrition, and great question, Greg. On one hand, we're learning the importance of gut health, and it's easy to think of when you think of gut health. If you haven't really thought about that or learned about it, you just think of like your gastrointestinal kind of health and how things are working. But it's become referred to as your second brain is your gut, and I believe that the worst finding is that so much comes from what you put into your body and the overall health of your gut system, as Dr. Eric said, your microbiomes and the balance there. We're starting to understand that at a level that we just barely understood it even 5 to 10 years ago. But now we have mass marketability to test that where you didn't really have that before. You can go on to a number of sites and order a test and do your own microbiome test, and so you can get some visibility into what's going on there in a way that is pretty profound. But it's just really a domino effect in terms of starting to empower decisions that you might make and things that you want to do to get your biome in balance. But what we're finding is that it has a direct impact on mental health. It has a direct impact on anxiety, moods, sleep, all these other things that are also almost just as powerful as the gut in terms of how you operate in your day-to-day life, how you process your thoughts, how you feel on a given basis, which all translates ultimately into your quality of life. And so I think that on one hand, it's just a real basic part of understanding nutrition, is something that, to Greg's point here, I think there's a number of emerging categories that physicians aren't overly educated on. because it wasn't part of the curriculum. There's a lot of emerging stuff right now, but the curriculum of a traditional physician path, a lot of this stuff is very similar to what it was 20, 40, 50 years ago. The nature of the healthcare industry, and there's a lot of strengths to this, but the nature of the healthcare industry is looking for something that's been peer reviewed 20 times and published in scientific journals and has been proven for 20 years. But that kind of tends to get you out of what is the most cutting edge breakthroughs and what, current thinking is. And so anything that's in the last 5 or 10 years, it's hard to filter into the healthcare system. And certainly if you're talking to a doctor who's been licensed 10, 20, 30 years, they're not going to be exposed to that, at least not in the traditional schooling. Now, there's a second part to Greg's question, which I think is almost just as important, and that's the medicinal qualities of nutrition and supplements. And this is something I can say I've made a big swing on in my life. I started out very much a Western medicine baby. I just thought, hey, what's the pill? Give it to me, take it, boom, I'm done, move on with my day. And there's still certainly times where pharmaceuticals are the absolute best, most effective way to treat something. But I have certainly made a swing much more towards holistic, herbal supplementation. I found those things to be way more impactful, certainly gentler on the body, and have a lot of other side benefits, whereas pharmaceuticals tend to have a lot of negative side effects. So I think that just the appreciation of a holistic approach to medicine is something that is going to permeate, across the entire system. It's just going to take some time. And the education, again, I think a lot of it is coming still from patients. They're self-prescribing, they're self-fulfilling. There's a lot of, confusing information out there, so it doesn't always lead to the best answers. But you certainly today can find hundreds or thousands of holistic clinics that didn't even exist 10 years ago. The unfortunate part about that is a lot of them are off the grid. They're off the insurance system. They're cash only. It tends to the kind of socioeconomic patient, and that's unfortunate because some of the lower socioeconomic patients actually have the worst nutritional problems. And so this is going to have to change. I remember when I was a kid, it used to be on the Sunday morning school cartoons, and they used to educate you on the food pyramid and stuff, and I just don't see that same kind of education from the government. I don't see that same kind of knowledge out there. But it's going to have to break, because I think people who are really deep into the nutritional part of it, not just from the foundational side of their gut, but the medicinal value.
Great insights. Thank you both. This topic is definitely resonating with people. We have more questions coming in, but let me ask you this question, Dr. Reese, because precision medicine is a pivotal aspect of your work in this area. So, could you explain what precision medicine is and why you think that this is going to be the future of healthcare?
Yeah. Outside of my experience working with patients for the last decade, I mean, at the end of the day, the future really is in empowering the patient and empowering the individual. But this whole mentality about precision medicine, individualized medicine, however you want to label it, is all about understanding like what works and what doesn't work for the patient in front of you. And so what works for Mark might not work very well for you, Sejal, and what works well for you might not work well for me. And so we have to not only respect that and appreciate that, but we have to use that to our advantage. And so long gone are the days where, we have 10 people who have the same symptom. Let's say they have migraines, and we're like, if you answer yes on this chart, you go down this treatment path. And if you answer no, you go down this treatment path. That might work if we're doing research where we need different cohorts and manipulating specific variables. But when you have a patient in front of you, it's really important to understand the person in front of you. And more importantly, too, I think one of the most humbling things about being in practice for me has really been the fact that, I've thought that I've had the absolute perfect treatment plans for specific patients. And then I've realized that they're not willing to do anything that I actually asked them to do, because I never asked them in the first place, hey, what are you actually willing to do? What do you want to do? Like, what is the first step in this process where we can actually start making progress together to have the patient own those results? Because my mentality in clinic was always, I want to get patients into the office, I want to figure them out, and then I want to get them out of my office to live their life. Like, that's the same mentality that I hope somebody has for me in my life if I ever need to get put back together. And so, I think the hard part about, where we're at today is that we're looking at people as if they are statistics and they are a research paper. And that's just not how reality works. We're not binary. We're not 1011s walking around. And so this whole focus on precision medicine is all about the person in front of you and empowering the patient. But then more importantly, on top of that too, we can only attribute 5% of chronic disease to faulty genetics. Now, like, just sit on that for a second, okay? We in the 90s spent hundreds of millions and billions of dollars mapping out the human genome, thinking that it had the answers to every single disease and every problem we were facing in healthcare. And what we realized is that your genetics essentially load the gun, but your environment really is the one that can choose whether or not you pull that trigger. Your genetics are a blueprint, but you don't have to build every single aspect of that house. And what's beautiful about your genetics is your genes turn on and off based off of diet, lifestyle, nutrition, sleep, mental health. I mean, all of these things that we know are really impactful for health in general. And so this whole focus on precision medicine just essentially summed up in the way of saying, we want to work with patients and we want to work with people to find out what works for them and what doesn't work for them. We want to take heavily educated guesses, but more importantly too, we want to get results. And we want to help them live the life that they know that they're capable of living. And that's when we start creeping into discussions that Mark and I have about longevity and biohacking and the anti-aging practices, where we're looking at disease no longer as this inevitable thing, but there's a real conversation going on about whether, aging actually is a disease that we could actually maybe prevent or reverse. Now that's interesting, and it's a bit still out there, but it's an interesting topic to look into.
Yeah, and I'll share a story, Sejal, about precision medicine for me. So I have a friend that unfortunately lost their young adult son to cancer years ago, and the diagnosis was there was only about a year and a half or 2 years before they had to find some kind of breakthrough cure and change the trajectory, or it was prognosis was pretty bleak. And unfortunately, they were in a country that a government medicine, and so there's very limited kind of options in terms of testing, et cetera. So basically, the way you look at any diagnosis, there's probably 2 or 3 pharmaceuticals or treatment paths that are going to work 80% of the time, or at least for the best shots, right? And so in this particular case, the doctors had put them on a treatment plan that was, again, in that 80% category. This usually works for most people. And that was about a 9, 12, I think 15-month process, something like that, before they had to realize it's not working. And by that point, it was kind of, the prognosis was getting bleaker. They tried one more thing, but they lost their son. And now today, looking back on that treatment plan 5 years ago, the science is available now to know that that particular patient, their son was not going to respond to that treatment plan based on their DNA profile. Like, it's a known thing. But they wasted 15 months of this person's chance at fighting on the wrong treatment plan that had absolutely no chance of succeeding. But because, 5-10 years ago, you were largely operating blind. You had to go with generalities. Well, this is a leading pharmaceutical. It works 80% of the time. Let's try that first. And if it doesn't work in 9 months, we'll try something else. Well, I think you get down to these spots where you can be way more granular in what's going to work or what's not work, and pick the right treatment plan at a level of detail and a data-driven nature that you couldn't even fathom 10 years ago. So that's one example that, it won't change my friend's outcome, unfortunately, but it will change the outcomes of others in the future. I also think there's a lot of, while we go into a hospital or a clinic and you see all this fancy technology, there's still a lot of really fairly simple approaches to how we try to treat people. It wasn't too long ago, I think in the 70s and 80s, they were still doing lobotomies for people that, had alcoholism and mental health. I mean, think about what a lobotomy is, and that was our answer, right? We're not too far from that in some cases. We're still doing stuff that is very kind of simple in terms of our approach. And so if you look at like chemotherapy, for example, if you haven't been exposed to it, chemotherapy essentially poisons the body in massive amounts. It just kills cancer faster than it kills your body cells, but it still kills your body cells. If you stayed on chemotherapy, your entire body would shut down. It's just the theory that we're going to kill cancer a little bit faster. So people come out very, very sick. It's a very unpleasant process. And it has been for decades. Today, precision medicine is taking us down a path where They're binding chemotherapy to specific cells that know how to hunt out cancer cells. So you inject it into the bloodstream, it finds the cancer cell, it bonds to the cancer cell, it does a micro release of chemotherapy and it kills that cancer cell, but the rest of the body isn't affected. So we're just getting higher targeted in how we release medicines. We're getting higher targeted in knowing which ones to treat certain patients with. And to me, this is all under the category of precision medicine that will impact outcomes in the future.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate you sharing that example, because last night when I was like thinking about our conversation today, I looked at this and I found this one statistic which just gave me so much hope. According to the National Institute of Health, if they said precision medicine has made a significant progress, and said in cancer treatments, the use of targeted therapies based on genetic markers has led to a 25% increase in overall survival rates, right? And we're just kind of getting started on turning that chapter. So there's this question that came in, and I wanted to talk about this, and we're almost at time now. But this is really important because we're doing a lot of this already, experimenting in the studio. But Kristen Ford asked this question, Hendricks. Hey, Kristen, thanks for joining us. She said, how do we make sure that the questions we are asking are the right question of the right experts, right? Where do we source both the questions and the expertise? That's a great question. Who wants to take that one?
Mark, you want to take that one first?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think part of what I think is going to happen with empowering the patients is you're going to see more and more communities. I mean, unfortunately, if you get diagnosed, even if it's something that's unique or rare, there is a community of people who've already dealt with it, and there's a lot of knowledge. And so, there's been a couple of chronic diseases, like I mentioned, in my family and friends network, and they had to become experts in something that I'd never heard of before, right? And so now part of what you do is, occasionally you'll get introduced to somebody who just had the diagnosis, but we're 14 years into it, and you're able to share a lot of stuff. You're like, wait, you don't have to go through the pain I did. Here's the 27 doctors I saw. Here's the 2 who get it. Here's some documents you need to read. Like, you can really, I think the community of this is going to become more and more valued. I also think you see a lot of doctors going off the grid, or retiring, who have a lot to share, but they no longer have maybe the fear of repercussions from the payer or insurance world, and they're willing to share. So I think you're going to see, at least to answer the first part, how do you come up with the right question? I actually believe a mix of community and actually physicians that are, off the grid or retired, are going to combine to create some really powerful communities to help people navigate new diagnoses faster. I think that, combined with AI and some of the emerging technologies, is going to make it just really easy to access that. And I think I'd probably say a similar answer to how you find the right experts. This is something that I think people need to appreciate. I think Dr. Eric said, but we've whatever the doctor says, that's gold. Don't question it. And I just really, I hate to say it, but I think you have to be an advocate for your own health, and you have to question everything you ever heard. And a couple of the scenarios that are near and dear to my heart, doctor 14, 15, 20, that we finally got an answer from. And you just have to, unfortunately, do that. Now, I think the technology, I think community reviews, I think the global nature of how we operate today, it used to be that you had to be able to see a doctor. Now you can see a specialist halfway around the world, and that might be the right answer. So I think that all these things are combining to be able to get to the right question to the right person in ways we couldn't even 10 years ago, 5 ago. And I think that's powerful. And I think that's how technology will empower it.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, I think that was a really good synopsis. The belief in science is believing that in some way, shape, or form, the experts are wrong, right? And what I mean by that is that science is always evolving, and every fact has a half-life. So what does that mean? I mean, things that we know that are true today could actually be found out to not be true tomorrow. And so we have to have that inherent humility about being okay with being wrong, but always being willing to challenge our thoughts, our beliefs, and what we think to be true. And I think that that's very difficult for us, not just in medicine, but just in general. And so, Mark brought up some great points about technology and community. I mean, those things are so ingrained in our DNA that we have to really lean on those. And so I think by just even being aware that you have the ability to challenge and ask questions and to really keep your providers and anyone who's in a health alliance position honest, I think that's really important for us, especially for empowering patients. And so, that's at the heart of progress. And I think that's so true in health and wellness as well.
Yeah, and look, we're at time already, and there's so many more questions I have for you, Dr. Eric and Mark, on this topic of we just started to scratch the surface. I mean, we didn't even get into all the different projects and exciting new codes we're looking at building. And I also want to make sure the next time we talk to people about if they want to join our journey, what are some of the things that we're looking at as far as criteria and how we evaluate founders or companies that are coming into the studio. And so there's so much we need to discuss. So I'm going to invite you back, Dr. Eric, to join Mark and I so we can continue to do a part 2 of this conversation. So I'll get the ball rolling on that. We've got some great comments. This conversation is resonating. I just want to give a shout out to Eric Hug. He said, well said, Mark. There's so much connectivity with nutrition and overall health, and overall well-being. Problem number 1, as outlined in our recent youth mental health. And that's a whole nother area, right? And he cited a resource here about youth and mental health. And I know that's a topic that all of us are super passionate about. So maybe we can dig into that during the next episode as well.
Happy to.
Awesome. Is there anything that either one of you want to add before we sign out for today?
I think the thing I want to say is, Sajal, thank you for having me on. Mark, absolutely always a pleasure. Like, I think, for everybody who's listening, we have so many exciting things going on. If you thought this was an exciting conversation, you should be a fly on the wall to the conversations we get to have within the studio internally. And so we've got a lot of fun things moving forward. We're really excited about this space. It's heavily resonating with a lot of people, and we're passionate about it. So thanks for supporting us. And if you want to be a part of it, reach out and let's see if there's conversations for us to have.
We can't hear you again, Mark.
Thank you, Sajal. Thank you, Dr. Eric.
Yeah.
Thank you both. Have a fantastic day. All right, everybody. We are taking next week off because it's my birthday and I'm going to be riding roller coasters with my son. But we'll be back the week after that to continue the making of a nobody. So reach out to any one of us if you want to learn more about how you can get involved with the studio and contribute to the space. Look, we're going to build 100 companies and we're going to need a lot of people to help make that happen. So welcome to our journey at any point. Reach out to us and have a great week, everyone. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.